Great.
Yep.
Hey, good to see you.
We're good to go.
All right. Welcome everyone to the May 18th, 2023 meeting of the CB6 Public Safety Committee. I'm Matt Roberts, chair of the committee. Meeting is called to order at 6:34 this evening, and we're joined by CB6 Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. As a reminder, New York State law requires all community board members to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on, your name is not properly displayed, you cannot count towards the quorum. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. There's time following the committee's discussion. We will field questions from the public. We still need a volunteer to take a meeting summary for tonight's meeting. If you're able to do so, please raise your hand through Zoom. Any volunteers? Committee? I know we're a small committee here.
Yeah, just a quick note. If public safety doesn't meet in June, then the minutes won't be needed until September. So there'll be plenty of time to work on them.
Got the whole summer to work on it. Quick meeting summary, guys. Any takers?
That's a good way to spend the summer, so sure.
Sure. So it's still you're volunteering?
Sort of, yeah.
Appreciate it. All right. So Stu Desser will take the meeting summary, and that takes us to the attendance, and Brendan will conduct the roll call.
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Stu Desser.
I am present.
Eric Goldberg.
Present.
Steve O.
Present.
Matt Roberts.
Present.
And for the record, Ann Seligman has been excused. But we have a quorum.
There we go. Okay. So the agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed at a time by the board office and appears on the screen before you. Committee members, if there's no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. And meeting summary from April 20th was distributed by the board office. If there's no objection, we will adopt the meeting summary as drafted. If you have any corrections or changes, please raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing none, the meeting summary from April 20th will be available on the CB6 website. Ground rules, I think most people are familiar. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, questions about committee business, or if you wish to make a motion, you should raise your hand through Zoom. Chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties we're having with a state in writing information such as email address was already stated loud on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I'll identify you. You can unmute yourself and you'll be able to speak. And of course, the state open meetings law requires Zoom cameras on, first and last name displayed during tonight's entire meeting from the so adjourn. So committee business here. So we have several items here. What we hope will be the season finale of the Public Safety Committee. So we'll be covering lithium-ion battery safety with the fire department. We'll be discussing discovery reform with the district attorney's office. And we have a pending resolution on reducing scaffolding, to discuss it amongst the committee. We'll be looking at budget requests. The budget committee will be meeting in June and needs some feedback from the committee so they can set everything for the next fiscal year. And we'll also a late ad here. So we will be hearing from the New York Civil Liberties Union. They'll be presenting on the concerns about the NYPD's Strategic Response Group, known as SRG. Since this presentation was just added a couple of days ago, I believe the committee and the public were just informed of it yesterday. We will not be considering a resolution tonight on that matter. So no action on agenda item number 5 until the fall, but that will be the first of several meetings potentially with them. So without further ado, we got lots to get to here, so I want to turn it over to Captain Rocco at the fire department. As committee members know, we did discuss the lithium-ion battery safety issue over the past several months. A lot of concerns. There's a lot of legislation that's been passed through the city council, and wanted to hear firsthand from the fire department as to how to go about best practices for safety. Captain, welcome.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Brendan and Matt, for putting this together. Thank you all for being here. I'm Captain Jerry Rocco with the Fire Safety Education Unit. We work at Fort Cotton, Queens. We go to schools, senior centers, community events. Anywhere there's a group of people, we need to educate them, teach them the do's and don'ts of fire safety. It has been a very, very busy year. Fire duty is up. Fire fatalities, unfortunately, are up. We have 44 fatalities so far. Last year we're at 99. We're gonna hopefully I'm wrong, but it's leading that way. It's just been crazy. The lithium batteries, definitely a big issue. We find lithium batteries in.
I'm sorry, it seems like you're very far from your microphone. Is it possible you could be closer?
How's that better? Is that better? Can you hear me at all?
We can hear you, but you sound like you're very far from your mic. I don't think that's the
Yes.
mic that's picking you up.
This one looks like, sorry, can you hear me now? Any better? No
Yeah,
better?
I mean, we hear you. It's just not ideal.
Let's see if I get it from the laptop. Can you hear me?
No, it sounds like it's using the microphone that's next to the camera.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. This system was recently installed and I was told it was working. It's working, but it's just, is there an echo or?
Yeah, I mean, we hear you. It's just, yeah, like they've been saying, it's the you're just not very close to the microphone, so it's picking up a lot of other noise from background from the room as well.
Okay. All right, give me 1 minute.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
Give them just a minute there to hopefully get a better sound quality. It's going to be more than a couple of minutes.
Okay. Any better?
About the same, I would say. I don't know.
Yeah, my apologies. I don't know what's going on. My mic appears to be working. So can we get through with it or?
Yeah, I would say go ahead. I mean, I can understand. I think we can all understand it. It's not the best sound.
Okay, my apologies. I'll speak slowly. Any questions, please let me know. Once again, with lithium batteries is a huge issue. We'll find them in at cell phones, in at laptops. Do cell phones go on fire? They do. Not a huge issue, but it's a possibility. Laptops, yes, they go on fire. Not a big issue. The big issue has been the e-bikes, the bigger batteries. And why is it such an issue today? E-bikes in the past, they might have been out 20 years. It was something for maybe a rich kid. He had one, they were very expensive, pricing came down, more kids had them. It was pretty much a toy many years ago. It is no longer a toy. We had COVID and restaurants were closed. They were doing deliveries. So each restaurant had 3 e-bikes doing their deliveries. People do not want to ride the subways, whether it be from COVID or crime, whatever. You have grown women and men riding e-bikes to work. That's more now a form of transportation. So they're just all over the place. E-bikes, the batteries blow for many different reasons. Some are damaged from the manufacturer. Other batteries, they may be a quality battery. It's on a steel bicycle frame that's pounding on the city streets. The batteries get damaged, they blow up. And a big issue is refurbished batteries, generic charges, overcharging. People, they're gonna have one battery, one is never enough. They have multiple batteries, right? So they always want to have a battery ready to go. They constantly charging the batteries. They charge them when they're not home or charge them when they're not sleeping. Nothing should be charged when you are sleeping or when it is unattended, including cell phones and laptops, right? If it starts smoking, you're not gonna smell it. If it starts burning, you're not gonna smell it. You have to be home, do not charge anything. Use the manufacturer's recommended supply cord and the battery. Do not use generics, do not use refurbished. Recently refurbished batteries have been outlawed. We have every battery has to have this, which is UL listing, which means it has been tested, it is a quality product, right? It's used to mean something. If they making generic batteries, what's it take to make a sign? I'm not so sure this means so much anymore. I hope it does. But a lot of times we have to look after ourselves. Laws are great. We have some laws in place, but people break laws all the time. So if you have a condo where you live, you have to look out for yourself, right? Like you have to look out for our neighbors. Bikes are no longer allowed in a lot of city buildings. They're not allowed in city housing. People are going to do it anyway. They get their bikes, where do they leave it? Right at the front door. The bikes blow up, and now their egress is impeded. They can't get out. Right? We had one bad one last year. We had the brother and sister, 4th floor of an apartment. They had 9 batteries on charge, and that apartment went on fire. The mother critically burnt. The boyfriend perished in that fire, and unbelievably, the brother and sister were able to scale down that building from the 4th floor, right, and save their own lives. So it is a big issue. I hate to say it's going to get worse before it gets better. I'm not sure, but we have to look out. If you have a neighbor who has an e-bike, let them know. We're trying to get out there to all these public events to hand out some literature, spread the word, let the people know how dangerous they are, let them know do not charge anything while it is unattended. Okay, so that is a big problem, the e-bikes. It's not the only problem. We still have the kitchen, probably the most popular room or most common room for a fire. Careless smoking, still an issue. A couple of weeks ago, we had arson, definitely an issue. Many fires start in many different ways. No one is immune. I have 3 firemen from my one firehouse, 3 firemen, 2 houses burned to the ground. Third house had over $150,000 worth of damage. These are firemen who know how to prevent the fire. And thank God, all fires cannot be prevented. We're going to prevent what we can, but we can always have a plan. Have a plan for your home. If you go stay by your mom's on weekends, have a plan for our house. You go to a hotel, is it a fireproof hotel? Is it a non-fireproof motel? You have to be familiar with your surroundings. It makes a big difference. Early detection is everything, right? Smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms. We are finding it is not enough to have these. We have people that have alarms that still do not know what to do. Okay, we had a bad fire last year. Many alarms activated. That fire was started with a space heater. Okay, was the space heater defective or was it misviewed? Was it too close to combustible? Space heaters, we're finished with them for the year. But our space heaters, they should be 3 feet away from everything. They should not be plugged into a power strip or an extension cord. Right, this is a power strip, this is an extension cord. We do not use these for anything that makes hot, nor do we use them for anything that makes cold. Anything that makes hot, no microwaves, no space heaters, no electric blankets, no toaster ovens. These get hot, they melt, they go on fire. Nor do we use these for anything that makes cold, refrigerator, air conditioner. They get hot, they go on fire. Any appliance that makes hot or cold needs to be plugged directly into an outlet. Okay, the power strip is fine for your computer, the printer, it's fine for the TV, the cable box, no issue. But always inspect these and make sure they're good. So we had that fire last year, started with a space heater, many alarms activated. It is documented, many alarms were ignored. People heard the alarms, they ignored them because it might have been a constant. Someone was always burning their food, someone was always smoking in the hallway. There was an issue. The alarms were ignored. As the alarms were ignored, the fire grows, it doubles in size every 30 seconds. The fire is getting bigger. The people left the fire department. The door was open for some reason. I heard it was broken. I heard it was chopped open. Not sure the fact is that door was open. We know that doors stop the spread of fire and smoke. Okay, so as that door is open, this fire and smoke is coming out. And people ventured out of the safety of their apartments, right? Many people, not all, many people were safe in their apartments. It was a fireproof building, and they did not realize they were safe. They ventured out, trying to exit that building, coming down the stairwell that was filled with smoke. And many people perished in the stairwell and the hallways of that building. Okay, they were safe in their apartments, they did not realize it. You have to know what type of building you live in. Is it fireproof? Fireproof in general, 75 feet, 7 stories or greater is gonna be fireproof. If the fire is in a fireproof building, if the fire is in your apartment, you do your absolute best to get out. Okay, if the fire is next to you, underneath you, on top of you, you're not going anywhere, you will stay in your apartment and be guided by the fire department. Non-fireproof building in general, 6 stories or less, you'll see fire escapes. A private house in general gonna be non-fireproof. It doesn't matter where the fire is in a non-fireproof building. Fire travels very quickly through those voids. It can go from the basement to the roof within minutes. It doesn't matter where the fire is, you have to get out, you have to stay out. And you have to have a meeting place for your loved ones, especially those kids. A meeting place near that home could be the tree, the mailbox, the neighbor's house. You have to have a meeting place where your kids know you're safe and you know they're safe. We don't want people going back into the building once they are out. Okay, the big thing, early detection, but once again, you have to know what to do. This is a combination alarm, smoke and carbon monoxide. We test it once a month. Does 3 quick beeps. Does that twice. And then 4 quick ones, carbon monoxide. Does that twice. Okay, so we know our alarm is good. But we have to know what to do with it also, right? How many alarms should you have? You should have 1 combination alarm, carbon monoxide and smoke, 1 alarm on each level of your home. Then you need 1 smoke alarm in each bedroom. The law says you have to have an alarm outside of your bedroom within 15 feet of each bedroom door. That is enough. Many people, they have the air conditioner, the TV going, they have their door to the bedroom shut. If this alarm activates outside that bedroom, there's a good chance they will not hear it. Or if the fire starts in the bedroom because maybe the air conditioner is plugged into a power strip, the fire starts in the bedroom, the door's closed, the smoke will get you before this alarm even knows what's going on. So you have to have these alarms, you have to have enough. We used to go to events throughout the city and hand out these alarms, and we found out that people, they put it in their drawer because they're waiting for their son to come. He's gonna be here in 2 weeks, he's gonna put it up for them, and we know that doesn't happen, it stays in the drawer for 2 years, 3 years, right? Or people would put it up in the wrong spot, they put it up in their kitchen, they put it up in a boiler room, it's a nuisance, it activates constantly, they think it's effective, they throw it out. Okay, so we don't want to hand these to the public, but they still are absolutely free. We work in conjunction with the Red Cross, there's a great program. You can call the Red Cross. We have teams that go out every day of the week. They will go to your house, see what you need, and install these alarms absolutely no charge. Great program, 877 Red Cross, 877 Red Cross. The fire department in the last 18 months have installed 38,000 alarms. And many documented saves because these alarms have been installed a week before a fire and have actually documented saved lives. The Red Cross has installed many more than that. I believe it might be 250,000 alarms in the last year. Absolutely free. Make sure you have them. Make sure you know what to do. For those who have a problem hearing, impaired, completely deaf, we also have the Lifephone machine. This works in conjunction with traditional alarms. Because the hearing impaired cannot hear, this alarm is for them. This alarm activates. The Lifephone machine will hear the activation. It sends a signal to this bench paper, which is placed underneath the sleeping occupant's mattress. The alarm activates, sends a signal here. This vibrates violently, waking up the sleeping occupant. Okay, great machine. If you need that, that is also available through the FNLY and the Red Cross. Absolutely no charge. Okay. So big thing, prevent as far as you can. Have a plan for your house, wherever you're staying, you're on vacation, that hotel, that motel, and importantly, practice that plan, especially when you have the kids. My kids do fire drills in school. Hardly any do fire drills at home, and they definitely should. They are more likely to be in a fire at home than they would at school. So we got to take care of ourselves and our kids and our families. Have that plan, practice that plan. And anybody have any questions?
Questions for Captain Rocco? Stu? Go ahead, Stu.
Hi, I hope I didn't miss it at the top, but speaking of just these batteries on scooters and bikes, how many of and what percentage of the fires are due to UL approved batteries as opposed to everything else?
I would not have the stats on that. I mean, I could try to get that for you. And I'll give Brendan a call in the morning. I don't know exactly how many are UL tested and approved. We do know that more so the generic batteries, the refurbished batteries are more of an issue, but it does not mean that a manufacturer's battery hasn't been a problem. So not exactly sure of the stats on which batteries, went on fire. I'll see if I can find that stat.
Yeah, we can follow up on that if there is such a stat. Other questions from the committee? And if there's any members of the public who have questions, I can put them in the Q&A. Field those as well. All right.
Yeah, I do see a member of the public wrote something in the Q&A.
Okay. You want to read the? Is it pertinent to the discussion?
Yeah. Nicole Paykoff says, "I'm a former member of the board. Yes, 1 minute. I guess a minute to speak."
All right. If Nicole has a question, we can hear her question.
Yep. You have been unmuted.
Nicole, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm a former member of the board. I'm Nicole. My question has been, it's both to Captain Rocco and also to the members of this committee. Why is there no legislation on board to basically ban these from apartment buildings in general? It's clearly a huge risk. Or to make it so that it's illegal to sell these batteries, these refurbished batteries. I mean, if there was more, I think, legislation as opposed to just education on this, I think it would make a big difference. And it's becoming a really deadly issue, big risk. I think we need to do something about it. Thank you.
Legislation has been recently passed to ban the refurbished batteries and generic batteries, so that has been done. As far as banning them completely, that's just going to be very challenging because of the money that's involved. with these and the sales, it's a big issue. We just, and as far as laws, like I said, people break laws all the time. It's not gonna mean anything. Of course will help, but it's not gonna stop the issue. Education has a lot to do with it. We need more PSAs out there. Let people see what it looks like when one of these things lets loose. It's not pretty. It's very graphic. You would be surprised what these little batteries look like, how fast the fire is, how explosive they are. So we need more PSAs out there to show the public what we're talking about, because a lot of people, you know, they still think they're immune. They think it's not gonna happen to them. We're doing our best to do that. We're doing our best. We're out there 7 days a week and sometimes 7 nights a week with the public at the public events, the parades, the community centers. We're letting them know what it looks like, what they can do to prevent it. And, you know, encourage them to be smart, you know, do not charge these while they're unattended. Do not charge them indoors, you know, make sure you buy a quality product. There's always gonna be a risk, even with a quality product, even being charged outside, you know, being charged properly. There's always gonna be an issue, but we wanna eliminate the fires if possible, or at least, you know, slow them down with proper procedures.
Yeah, that's very, very important points there. So I'll go to Brendan first and then I'll.
Yeah. I just want to, you know, the office did get like an image of a flyer related to these lithium ion batteries earlier today. But if there's something online that we at CV6 can share on our monthly newsletter, please send that to us. You know, this is a very pertinent issue to a lot of our constituents because I don't know if you remember the fire caused by an e-bike on East 52nd Street. But a few months ago, there was an e-bike, a fire caused by a lithium ion battery in an e-bike on East 52nd Street, and it injured dozens of people.
Yes, there's plenty online. If you Google online and go to FDNY Smart, there's videos that you see what it looks like, and the public needs to see what they look like. Once again, you'd be surprised how explosive they are. But the videos are on YouTube. Just Google it, and you'll find them. Go to FDNY Smart, you will find them.
Great.
Sorry, me now.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, the board office will definitely, we'll work back and make sure that the information gets shared in multiple forms, goes out in the newsletter. And if there's any other information we can distribute at all the summertime events, we'll certainly try to do that. Captain, the one thing I have for you, one question, are there any gaps in the legislation that you see as a safety risk as far as e-bikes or any other fire safety concerns?
I can't think of anything offhand. I'm not completely familiar with everything that's going on. I know they got things in the works, and we'll see what happens. They're working with the FDNY to see what is actually needed, what is going to get these numbers down, what's going to keep the public safe. So, but as far as what we're missing on, the PSAs, I want to see some PSAs. We had plenty of PSAs, close the door for years and years. That is something that works. We need to see PSAs with these bikes, and they are working on it. And that'll change a lot of people's views.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Fair enough. Education certainly goes a long way, which I think is really what the general public is looking for right now. It's very confusing. And there's some subtle differences in what's safe, what's not safe.
Right.
Anything else for Captain Rocco? Steve, go ahead.
I know Stu has asked this before, but does the FDNY keep track of the types of materials from these e-mobility devices, what's causing the fire? If it's the battery, if it's the charger, if it's refurbished or if it's certified? Like, does it break down to that detail? Because
As best they could, but when these things blow, they blow, so a lot of times we don't know what's left, we don't know if it was a refurbished battery, you're not gonna be able to really tell many times, you know, unless we get information from the owner of that e-bike. But as far as a refurbished battery, I don't know if we can tell the difference, especially after it lets loose. Generic may be a little different, I'm sure they're keeping tabs on everything, once again, they don't have numbers. If they have generic charges, you know, that's all tally, see who had a generic charger. If possible, we're gonna determine that. If they had one battery on charge or 9 batteries on charge, we're gonna try to determine that. And everything is being tracked as far as I know. But, you know, how accurate it is, I'm not sure. Once again, you know, refurbished battery, how do you tell that it's been refurbished after it blows up? Unless the, you know, owner tells you, hey, I just had it refurbished, so.
Very good. All right, if there's no other questions, I don't know, Captain, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Any closing thoughts?
Just want to let you guys know once again, Fire Safety Unit is there for you, 7 days, 7 nights a week. We will go to your Cub Scout meeting, that community center, senior center, that street fair. We also have 3 smokehouse trailers, which are simulated apartments. We fill them with make-believe smoke. The Hollywood smoke, we troll the kids through, show them how to get out of a fire, God forbid they ever in one. Great program, the trailers have pretty much booked up for the summer, but you never know if you need those. We'll do our best to get one to you. But as far as going to an event with a table and some literature, we'll be happy to do that. Get over there, talk to the public, answer questions, hand out some literature. So give us a call, give us an email, and we'll be there for you.
Right.
Once again, thank you for putting this together. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Captain. So fdnysmart.org for everything you need. And of course, the board office, you know, we'll redistribute any information that we can.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks, Captain Rocco.
Okay, thank you guys. Stay safe always. And enjoy your summer.
You too. Take care.
Take care.
Again. All right. So that concludes agenda item number 1. So we're going to shift gears now on this very busy Thursday evening, and we're going to discuss discovery reform. So I know almost everybody's heard of bail reform, but discovery reform is one of those lesser known aspects of the criminal justice reforms that have taken place over the years. And I want to welcome in our good friend, Kevin Jean-Baptiste from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, who's joining us tonight. Kevin, so this came up, I guess, at our full board a couple of months ago, as budget negotiations were underway in Albany, really just trying, as far as, possible changes to the discovery reform, which was implemented as part of what the public will refer to as the bail reform package. Why don't you just give us a brief summary for those who may not be familiar with it as to what it is, and then we'll get into did anything change.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And before I do, I just want to say it's good to be back with CV6 folks. I covered this area for a number of years before Eric took over, and Eric wasn't able to make this one, so I'm happy to come back anytime. And now in a different capacity, I'm serving as a Deputy Director for Community Engagement for Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. And we really elevated the work that we do in community engagement. And Eric has been keeping us involved and close to the issues that you are dealing with in Community Board 6. So we're very, very much so familiar with the issues and continue to remain abreast. And again, I'm just happy to be here to be able to speak a little bit more about issues that are plaguing our office a little bit, and then hear also how that impacts your community. So to answer your question, Matt, discovery reform is essentially a law that requires prosecutors to turn over evidence, paperwork, anything that we have, any information that we have on a case, on a defendant that is relative to the case. We have to turn that information over in a short period of time. we had created a one-page sheet that had a number of recommendations that we would like to see in order to be able to meet the demands of the law. But unfortunately, in the last legislative session, none of them were passed. And so we're still at the same area where we were before advocating for discovery reform. So essentially what it does is there's a certain number of days, between 30 and 45 days, we have to turn over a certain amount of information to the defense counsel once an arrest has been made, and we either have an indictment or we're prosecuting a case as a misdemeanor. What that does in turn now, a timer starts, and the prosecutor has to then work with a number of agencies, people that were at the scene, NYPD testimony, any video evidence, any phone conversations, text messages, et cetera, contact information, and all of that information has to be turned over to the defense counsel. And we believe that this is the right thing to do. The defense needs to know all of the information and evidence that we have against them. And we're not against discovery, meeting the demands of discovery at all. What is a bit difficult to meet is the timeline to be able to turn over the discovery, as well as if we don't turn over certain information that may not be relative to the case at all, that can still cause a case to be dismissed for not meeting discovery demands. In turn, what that then does is cases get dismissed. You see folks who have numerous offenses and a case will get dismissed because a discovery demand was not met, even if that information was not relative to the case in any way, shape, or form. And so those are some of the recommendations we were asking the legislature to make. In fact, I can read them over to you and go a little bit more in depth if that's helpful. But one of the recommendations was requiring prejudice before dismissing a case for discovery non-compliance. That just means that we wanted there to be some discretion in terms of the information that we have to turn over. As it stands right now, everything and everything must be turned over. And then you can imagine there may be instances where one small piece of information is forgotten and therefore the case is now dismissed. The second recommendation is requiring a defense attorney to challenge discovery violations within a timely manner. Essentially, as it stands right now, the defense attorney does not have a time limit of when they can make a discovery demand. It can be at the, very close to when the case is about to either have a hearing or if it's a trial, or usually these happen far before trials. And there's no time limitation right now. And so they can continue saying, if there's a piece of information that they feel they don't have enough information on it, and we don't have enough time to turn over that information, puts our assistant district attorneys in a bit of a difficult situation to then, with an even shorter timeline, try to turn that information over. And then the last recommendation was using a substantial compliance requirement. And it says under the standard, prosecutors would be able to file a COC, which is basically a recommendation that once they have turned over all of the information that are required to present the case, then they meet the demands. Essentially, kind of what we spoke about a little bit earlier is everything that's relative to the case. So if someone that has nothing to do with the case, maybe their contact information or a piece of information that is not necessary to move forward with the case or that we don't plan on using in a case, we believe that that information should not cause us to not meet discovery demands and have the case to be dismissed. So again, unfortunately, none of these recommendations were passed. However, we did receive more funding from the state to be able to meet some of these demands. And all 5 district attorneys' offices right now are working to try to figure out what's the best way to use that funding, whether it means hiring more staff, whether it means creating a system, a better system to be able to get the information that we need. But that's kind of to be determined and see how that funding becomes useful to meet the demands. But as it stands right now, we still have to turn over the information in a relatively short amount of time. And our assistants there's a lot of pressure on them to meet those demands so that the cases don't get dismissed.
Good summary there. So I'm going to open it up to questions from the committee first. So I guess there's multiple points of view on this from the community's standpoint. I mean, I think, To what extent, I guess first, to what extent, the most common question I get in regards to discovery reform is how does that impact the cases that are, say, declined, that the office declines to prosecute, just because of resources and manpower?
Yeah, so you'll have cases that we know we won't be able to get that information in 45 days or in 30 days, and we'll have to move to decline the case. Or sometimes you might have a case that we sort of hold off a little bit before making an indictment, or hold off before charging the defendant, because then that gives us more time to meet that discovery demand as well. So there's decline to prosecutes happen for multiple reasons. Sometimes you may have an arrest made, but the officer doesn't show up for the testimony. We can't move forward with that case. That has to get dismissed or declined to prosecute. Sometimes it's policy reasons. Sometimes we have certain policies where we're not prosecuting certain cases, and the officer makes an arrest for it regardless of the policy, and due to policy reasons, we'll decline to prosecute that case. And then it's also foresight. Sometimes we're looking ahead of our demands. If we have, our early case assessment bureau is essentially a trial bureau that takes in all of the cases when they come in. If we have a very busy night, very, high level of violence, whether it be shootings, stabbings, things of that nature, the felony violent crimes are going to take priority. And so when you have lower level offenses that is going to eat up the time that we need for discovery, we may not be able to prosecute those cases in the fashion that we would like, and therefore we would have to prioritize the more serious cases. So those are some instances where you might see a decline to prosecute.
All right, let's go to Stu Desser.
Oh, first of all, sometimes the reason you decline to prosecute is because you don't think there's a case there, that the arrest may not have been a good arrest. I would be very concerned about giving the office discretion. As you know better than I do, I no longer remember the name of the case, but a case that you brought against a bad cop was thrown out not too long ago because an assistant district attorney failed, I believe, on 3 occasions to hand over discovery documents that should have been. And one of her excuses was she didn't think it was relevant. I don't think it's a good policy to allow the prosecutor's office to decide what's relevant. I think open discovery is better. And I think the question is, why does it take so long to get to collect all this information? Is it a matter of administration and technology? Obviously you have the officer's report right away, you have witness statements, you've done interviews. Is there a point where, well, you explain that.
Yes.
Why does it take so long to collect?
Yeah, to your first point, Stuart, the case you mentioned with the officer and the case getting dismissed, that's one that we're not proud of. And I know the office, we took action against that and ensured that other assistants did not employ that strategy. The law requires that we turn over all of the evidence. We turn over all of the evidence. And again, we're asking for more time to turn over all of the evidence because it requires all of the evidence. And so that's less of what we want to see. We want to see less cases getting dismissed as a result of something, as you mentioned. But to get all of the information is quite a difficult task. There are officers who sometimes make arrests and then we try to schedule them to come in to get the testimony. I know in previous days they had to come in physically, sit down with an assistant in ECAB, and we're typing as they're telling us exactly what happened. Now with virtual and Zoom, it's a little bit easier to get that information. But then there's sometimes there's video evidence that we have to get, and we have to canvass, work with store owners, or find out who owns the camera or has access to the video footage, and that also takes time. So each thing that we need to get, the clock is ticking. we operate obviously from a 9 to 5 perspective. There's assistants that work the night evening shifts as well. But there are people who we can't get access to during overnight hours, but that clock is still ticking and regardless. So while we have the 30-day window, or sometimes 45-day window, we don't have essentially the entire 24 hours of each day to get those things. And then there's different administrative gaps as well. There are folks who are reaching out to people. There are people who are taking vacations. So a number of things come to play. We try not to let it happen as much as we can, and we use the resources that we have available to us to try to meet the demands, but there are some few that are difficult to get all of the pieces to fall into place every single time, and that's what we want to avoid seeing.
Well, just explain the rule, though. Let's say that you have somebody who's in custody for 30 days. You haven't gotten lab results back yet. The requirement is you hand over everything you have up to that point, and then the lab, you're not penalized because you didn't get the lab results back yet, right?
I'm not entirely sure. I've known, I think I can recall back to a case where we were waiting for testing on it wasn't a lab result, it was more of like a narcotics to make sure that it was what we prosecuted it as. And I believe the case, we made motions to be able to extend the time as a result. So I think you may be right, and I want to double check so it says I don't want to answer that incorrectly. But that is one of the instances where time may run out. We may be able, sometimes we may have gaps where we can get results or things of that nature, or if we're testing again for narcotics or things of that nature, those things need time before we can move forward on the case to ensure that it's what we charged it as. But I want to get back to you on that one, Stuart. I want to make sure that I'm not misspeaking and get the right answer to your question.
Okay, so just to conclude my remarks, obviously we also have to worry about the rights of the accused, some of whom may be innocent, and others who could not make bail, so they're stuck in behind bars. What we want, obviously, is a solution that satisfies both your needs and the rights of the accused. And so the question is, are there administrative and technical manners by which we can resolve this to everyone's satisfaction?
That's what we're hoping for with the new funding. We didn't have access to that much funding before. And so with the new funding, hopefully we can upgrade technology and fix the administrative lapses that we have and be able to.
Could you just be specific? What would you do with this funding?
Oh, I can't speak on that level, Stuart. That is far beyond. That's up to the chief strategic officers in the office and folks who are much more involved in the administrative aspects of the office than I can.
Okay, thank you.
All right, yeah, let's try to keep this somewhat high level. Steve, you have a question?
It's kind of just following up what Stu was asking. I was certainly curious about where the bottleneck lies. It seems like, Kevin, you were mentioning a lot of the bottlenecks seem to be based on human resources, just people being available, people finding time. And I also understand that discovery has become more complicated. It's no longer paperwork. It's no longer simple interviews, but now there's a digital aspect to it. There's video evidence. There's multitudes of different types of discovery material that has to sit somewhere, that has to be collected somehow. But it seems like you led with the conversation that resources, people, is what's a major bottleneck that's preventing the ability to quickly execute, quickly discover, quickly, for the DA to get to what they need to get done. Is that what? Am I capturing that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's one aspect of it, Stephen, where all district attorneys' offices experienced attrition, and I think we're in the up and up now, in the sense of we're starting to get back the number of assistants that we usually average out. But last year, a couple of years ago, right after the reforms came into place, we had a chunk of assistants leaving the office because prior to like the different edits or the different versions of the bail reform and discovery reforms that came out. It was extremely difficult to meet demands and led to higher attrition rates, and it led to people just most of their time was doing discovery work. And so that caused a significant issue for all 5 district attorneys' offices. Alvin D.A. Bragg went into the city council and testified on that issue. So did the other district attorneys, just about how much more resources they need because their assistants are leaving. They were advocating for higher pay. They were advocating for different resources to try to get the morale back up. And so that is one aspect of it. The other aspect is some of what I mentioned is non-information that's just not relevant to the case, or information that we don't intend on using that has to get turned over as well. That just increases the amount of information and then the amount of time that's required to the amount of time that it's going to take to turn over that information as well. But yeah, some of it does come down to manpower as well. And I believe as of now, we're starting to average out a little bit. So with, again, like I mentioned, the funding, the extra funding, having enough assistance and manpower, and then with the cooperation, hopefully with everyone knowing these demands that we have to meet, we can get a much more smoother and streamlined process to get the discovery met.
All right. Did you have something else, Steve?
There we go. There's the unmute button. Excuse my ignorance on this subject, but does the district attorney's office, do they do contracting out like resources like discovery? Because if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but the private industry does have a lot of contract work for resources, for discovery services. Is that something that the district attorney office cannot entertain because it's a state agency, a city agency?
No, I'm not entirely sure of the laws on that, whether we can contract out. Based off of what I've seen, when Discovery first came into play in 2020, we hired internally. We created new positions, like new folks to like literally take documents and run down to courtrooms, and like manage copy machines and things of that nature. So looking at it from that perspective, it seemed as though that we sort of increased our access internally and did not outsource items. But I'm not entirely sure, because based off of looking at the district attorneys and their testimonies to the city council, it was primarily trying to increase their capacity internally. But again, I'm not ruling that out, that we can outsource, and I will double check to see if that's an option, but I'm not sure I've heard that as a solution. So there may be laws preventing us from doing that too.
Anything else for Kevin? I think
I do see a question. I do see a question from a member of the public.
Sure.
Asking whether the 45-day timeline was part of bail reform.
Yes, it was in the initial package, the initial 2020 bail reforms. And yeah, so again, it gets coupled into bail reform, but it's really discovery reform. But again, it was titled the bail reform laws. So yeah, all of it gets coupled in, and it was part of the initial change that happened in 2019/2020.
So just to recap here, so nothing changed at all during the budget process.
No, we got more. Well, there's more funding. There's something
More funding, yeah,
more funding,
potentially more resources.
and that's TBD to see how those funding will be utilized to meet the demands. But I'm happy to share our recommendations. We're going to continue making the community and making our electeds and partners aware of it, and hopefully, again, we can come to a medium to meet these demands, because I think we think it serves both purposes, both for public safety and for making sure that the defense has the information they need, because the reality is that mistakes are made as well on both sides, and so having both the defense and prosecutors being transparent and having the information can lead to less mistakes in our system. So yeah, so I'll make sure that I share our discovery reforms fact sheet and our recommendations, and then those 3 questions that I didn't have answers to, I'll follow up. It sounds like this is our last meeting till the summer, so I'll have Eric reach out to you all in the fall with the answers to those.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, we'll definitely bring this issue back in the fall. Try to put together just what's point of view as to where we go here, and hopefully maybe by this time next year we'll see a little bit more. Stu, you have one last.
Just one question. What is your office stand on open file discovery?
I don't know where we stand on that, and I can again double check where we stand on it. That'd be more follow up for the fall again when we raise this topic again. But still, you have a number of great things that I have to tap into different folks in the office. So as you likely know, different people do different things in the office, and it's just a matter of getting them all together and on the same page to share that information with the community. So I'll make sure we get that information and be transparent with you all as well.
We're glad to give you exercise.
All right. Yeah, thanks again, Kevin. We'll talk again soon. And we'll pick up the conversation in the fall with the committee. I think we'll have some new committee members appointed by then as well. So,
Great, looking forward to it.
likewise.
Thanks.
Take care, Kevin. Good to see you.
Take care. Good to see you all. Have a good summer.
Too. All right. So from discovery reform to scaffolding, as we move right along here. So you guys received the members of the committee received the draft resolution on, what was it, Monday? I believe Monday afternoon. So that's just a I'm going to put that on the screen. So this is just a quick draft that I threw together based on our conversations last month. We'll invite members of the public to look at it now. So I took all the information that the borough president's office passed along. I put together some text for us to work from. Obviously, we'll need a title for the resolution. Committee members, do you have any questions, concerns, any proposed changes for the draft? Essentially, here we're bundling all these pieces of legislation because, as we discussed, they all basically need to be passed and signed into law to make a difference here. Stu?
I would just on the first whereas, instead of saying that we received a presentation, I think what we're doing is we're really endorsing the borough president's plan, right?
Uh-huh.
So I mean, I would say we, all right, I'll leave it. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, we can
I was
tweak.
gonna say it doesn't, it's not really making a point that we heard a presentation. I think the point is that everything that follows is from that presentation, really.
Right. I mean, it's yeah, I mean, it's really just kind of setting the stage. Just kind of giving everybody a little more context as to how this all came to life. But we can tweak that or modify it as needed. All right, any other comments?
While we're waiting, I will say that Nicole Paykoff has asked again to say something about this.
Wow, Nicole must miss CB6. Go ahead, Nicole. We'll get you back on.
You should be able to talk now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, thank you. I had a few things about this. I also used to work in the real estate industry, so I do know a lot about scaffold, and I spoke to Keith Powers about this, and some of the issues, I'm not sure if they're covered in all the intros because there's no details of them in the resolution. So I was just wondering if you guys were familiar with these. First of all, the fines for scaffolding being up have to be a lot more severe than they ever were, because there are companies, especially the large real estate companies, that will not take the scaffoldings down because it's too expensive and too much of a pain in the neck. They'd rather wait for the fine and just pay it. That's one of the things. The other items I would address with this, which are pretty serious, is in a lot of other places, they're using drones, which have to go through actual Air Force or air training, safety training, to be able to, be used in New York or in other places to actually do local law 11. And something like that, or I should say, being able to look at the scaffoldings and the building requirements and the facades, those should actually, that should be somewhere in there that the city is open to reviewing that, or open to looking into that, because half of the reason these scaffoldings exist is because of local law 11, and they're consistently abused. Like, I live on 24th between 2nd and 3rd. If you go down my block, there's at least like 7 scaffoldings on buildings. And hasn't been a time in 20 years where I've been in that building that I live in where there hasn't been a scaffolding on at least a few of the buildings on the block. It's getting to the point where it's ridiculous, and it is a huge problem with quality of life and also the amount of work they're doing. So I think something that should be explored, if it's not, and that's what I'm asking you guys essentially, is there anything about drones and local law 11 in all of the proposals on the scaffolding, because that's what a lot of the scaffolding has to do with. And
Yes.
thank you for letting me speak.
Sure. Thanks, Nicole. Yes. So basically, for you and for anyone else that hasn't actually read all of these proposed bills, what we were working from was the borough president's shed the shed plan, which, yes, that does update local law 11, and does include drones and different design standards as well. So all of that is in. I'm not going to get into which bill contains what, but basically there were, I believe, like 4 or 5 strategies that the borough president's office put out to tackle that issue. And in order to do that, there's numerous pieces of legislation within the city council, which hopefully, we'll move at some point. But yes, local law 11 and the drone issue is part of that. Was there anything else? All right, committee members, where do we want to go with this?
I mean, Matt, are you suggesting we're ready to vote for this tonight? I mean,
Yes.
for me, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we discussed this. I mean, for
Yep.
me, I'm supportive of
Yeah, if the committee
eliminating
feels,
sheds. Yes. and
Sure,
scaffold.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, all I
Yeah.
need is a motion from a
Yeah.
committee.
Yeah. So
Making a
I
motion.
move I move to approve this resolution.
All right, is there a second?
A second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded. Brendan will call the roll.
Okay, when I call your name, please say whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause. Stu Desser,
In favor?
Eric Goldberg,
In favor?
Steve O,
In favor.
Matt Roberts.
Favor.
With 4 in favor, nobody opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause, the resolution passes.
All right, very good. Thank you all. We just need a title for that. Added. All right. That was agenda item number 3. Now we're going to move on to agenda item number 4. Again, switching gears, and we're going to talk about budget requests. Everybody's favorite time of the year. So Brendan's going to pull up the air table here. So committee members, I think we went through, I think all of you were on board last year when we went through this. Basically, this is a preliminary. We can keep, we can make no changes, we can remove, we can add. It's basically really just our point of view to the budget committee here as to what our priorities are. Brendan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to, for the committee, draw particular attention to the agency response section, just to see what the responses were to these budget requests. And not that the committee is required to change anything based on what was said, but it may be helpful for committee members to see what responses we got back.
Yeah, let's, that's a good point. Let's start there. Because I know these were not new requests last year. So this, so fiscal year 23 is the most recent. It was not recommended in 22.
But the most recent one is the one that says current year response.
I see,
And
so fiscal 20.
yeah, it would be fiscal
Nothing
24.
determined. What
I
exactly?
know it's confusing because we're in fiscal year 2023. The responses here are for fiscal year 2024. So I know it's a little bit confusing.
Okay, and the fiscal year that Reshma and her committee will be working towards would be fiscal 25. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So it cannot be determined at this time. I mean, and that was Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. Yeah, I don't even know how to. I would leave it on there. It's still an issue. But what I'm seeing here is probably we'd have to work offline with Councilman Powers in his office. See if anything can actually be done. We get on the list. So, all right. Stu?
So just explain this to me. Park enforcement officers are hindered because they don't witness an event directly. They still can't make an arrest until, for certain violations, unless they witness it directly, right? So even if there's surveillance video, the video is recorded, they're not watching that video live, right? I explain that.
Right. I mean, yeah, surveillance video can be used, to pull evidence. If were to, I mean, it can be used in real time. It can help officers survey the plaza, and it can also be used for evidence.
Is it used in real time?
I mean, is somebody sitting there watching it 24 hours a day? No. Are they available in real time? Yes. But if I would say there's probably a low chance that it's being viewed.
Right. So if someone dials 911 and reports an incident in progress in the park, does that get communicated to the precinct and the precinct watches the video or?
Well, no, if somebody calls 911, they're going to go there and respond to the incident. I mean, it can be helpful during, when protests occur or are scheduled. It can be helpful, really just, dealing with the quality of life issues, making sure that, they understand who the people are. There's a lot of investigative work that goes on through cameras. Does that answer your question? I mean, it can aid in an investigation.
I'm just trying, I'm reading the text under the blurb. And it suggests that when an officer doesn't witness an incident directly, that the video will somehow be some benefit, but there's certain violations for which the officer can't issue a summons or make an arrest unless they witness it, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, sir, it varies by the offense, but let's say you accuse me of assaulting you and there was no officer there, but there's a video that's showing that I'm assaulting you, and there's, that's how you build a case.
Oh, I get that it can be
Yeah.
used after the fact. I was just reading the blurb and I.
Oh, I
wasn't-
see. Yeah, I mean, I hate this process. I think it's terribly inefficient, but yeah, I mean, it's been argued by the organization that cares for the park and many community residents. I mean, we guys remember over the past few months we discussed the conditions from the women's shelter nearby that spill out into this plaza. And some of those issues. So there's definitely a lot of crime and quality of life concerns. So I mean, I wouldn't. Is it priority number one? I mean, in a migrant crisis, absolutely not. But from the lens of this district, and in the lens of public safety, it's an item. I don't know that it's top item. But yeah. So this was the request that we have on there, and basically it doesn't sound like we got any evidence or any real answer there. Anyway, I'm gonna go to Steve.
I don't know if I agree with the blurb being cost effective, but I guess the question I really had was, it seems to be, is there a kind of a soft rule where they don't want cameras in New York City parks? I don't know of a park that has cameras, and haven't spoken to a couple of people from the New York City Parks Department. They always seem to face challenges where they're working on something, they finish what they had to do, and then sometimes that item is, messed with, vandalized, stolen, and they can't do anything about it because the challenges they have with security while they're working, right? That's just one example. Is this supposed to be bridging some gap where instead of sending an officer to sit there and wait, you just have someone just observe it through the cameras? It's just something that I haven't seen. Like, I know it's been a request at these two places, but does the Parks Department not allow cameras in any other parks?
No, of course they allow. I mean, many parks have. I mean, not every park has them, but I mean, they're around. I would have to ask the Parks Department, what their point of view on it is. But I mean, to me, it's the residents and the individuals that use the park and the police department and the elected officials kind of agreed that it should be something that we look at. I know a couple of years ago it was on the ballot for participatory budgeting when it did not win the vote, but it's definitely something that's feasible. So it's just a question of, the more people scream and yell about it, the better the success rate. But I mean, you would have to ask the precinct and how much they would use them. Say that speak. Other questions, comments? I mean, I didn't write this blurb. I have nothing to do with it. It's more the idea, and then we can work with the budget committee if there's anything we want to change, though. But the budget committee does a lot of this. Steve, go ahead.
When you say change, what can we change?
I mean, it's real. I think our options are: do we leave it on there, resubmit it, or do we take it off? I mean, when I say change, personally, if it were up to me, I would just leave it as is. But I mean, to Brendan's point, I mean, the funding for this request cannot be determined at this time with the most recent feedback we've gotten. So that tells me That's inconclusive to me. So I would leave it on there. And then, I don't know, did we have anything else at Bellevue South? Agency recommends funding this budget request, but they, okay, so I mean, it sounds like it will happen eventually, but funding, everybody's budget is a certain number, and not everything's going to fit in that number. So personally, yeah, I mean, Bellevue South is another park where there's been a lot of issues over the years. But as you can see, if you look at the fiscal year 22 response, they did not recommend it. So the response year to year tends to vary. So I would leave both of those. Anyone want to remove anything? Anyone want to add anything? I guess would be the bigger question. Is there anything else from a public safety standpoint that's critical as a budget item for this district?
Hey, Matt, are we going to revisit this in the fall, or this is the submission now?
So I don't know the budget committee's
Same
timelines,
thought.
but I know they're going to be meeting. I think there will be another opportunity to bring it back in the fall. Brendan, do you know the answer to that? I know they're going to meet in June on this.
Yeah, so I was raising my hand to talk about timeline. So the community board is required to submit its budget requests. I'm going to work backwards here in terms of timeline. The community board is required to submit its budget requests to the city by the end of October 31st, which means that in order to submit those budget requests on time, the community board will need to vote on all of our budget requests at its full board meeting in October, which this year is on October 11th. The Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee will meet in September and October. Its October meeting will need to be rescheduled because the second Monday of October is Columbus Day / Indigenous Peoples Day. The September meeting would be on Monday, September the 11th. If the if the Public Safety Committee does not have a June meeting, it would not meet until September 15th, which is after budget's September meeting. And it's really at the the September meeting where a lot of decisions are made. By the October meeting, the committee tends to want stuff already be finalized. So talk with Reshma, but I think ideally the committee would want things formed before the summer.
Yep.
If the committee has anything new in September, I don't think Reshma would would turn things down. But it would certainly be a lot trickier if the committee waits to have any sort of response until its September meeting.
Yeah. So that given that, I would leave these two on there. And if you guys have other things that come to mind or anything that's brought to light over the summer, obviously we can still talk offline with Reshma throughout the summer and then bring it to the committee in September. Steve, you have your hand?
These two came up because of a couple instances at both parks, at both capital projects. Our past few meetings were heavily on challenges with operational expenditures of having DHS provide security at least one of the facilities. Doesn't make sense to request put an OpEx type request for DHS for security at their facilities. It seems it's a little bit challenging since we haven't had a conversation or presentation from DHS, but we did spend a great deal of meetings discussing this very topic.
Yeah, I mean, as you'll recall, we had 3 meetings in which we invited DHS to present, and they declined 3 times. So, I suppose we could revisit that at some point, but I mean, I think the resolution that we passed speaks for itself, and that is, to my knowledge, has gotten no response, right, Brendan?
No, it has not gotten any response, nor have I heard about any response to the letter that Councilmember Powers' office sent to DHS.
Yeah, something.
Unless they have something to say that, like, I haven't, unless they've heard something I have not.
Certainly haven't heard. I mean, as you can, I mean, all you have to do is turn on the news and you'll know that there's busloads of migrants arriving daily in the city, and that seems to be where the focus is right now. So, I mean, between us and all of our neighbors and the public, I think the budgets are going to be drastically reduced this year just to accommodate all the expenses, unless the federal government somehow picks up the tab on the migrant piece. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I wish that we could do more on that. I don't know that we can. I don't know that we can put in an expense request for that specifically, but I don't know, Brendan, what do you think? Is that something that we did pass a resolution on it and got no response? But do you think an expense request would get a response, or would they just tell us that they don't have any money?
Well, just by virtue of submitting something as a budget request, an agency is, the corresponding agency is going to respond. It's just a question of how are they going to respond. Every single one of our budget requests got some form of response. It's just, is the response going to be in a manner that is more favorable to what the community board wants?
Steve?
Yeah, I understand there's a resolution, but kind of punctuating, Brendan said, talking about the funding aspect of it is a different conversation. We've had challenges with just talking to someone from DHS to even present the notion of security and of a particular location, but this was just on the funding aspect of it, which I assume is going to be a completely different resource from the same department. It might be kind of like attacking similar subjects, multiple angles, but I don't know, call it frustration. But it is something that has taken up quite a few meetings of public safety. And as you mentioned, Matt, things are kind of trending in a way where we may need the additional support, and the funding might lean itself towards where this makes sense for where the current, where things are right now. So.
Yeah, I'd be fine adding that. I don't know. Do we need a motion? Is that the same process as a resolution, or I'm not even sure how the process works for this.
Yeah, so first of all, it needs to be clear what the request is for. I'm not sure I'm entirely clear what the request is for. So that's the first thing. Then I would say, I would say that I see part of the challenge is that there isn't a super formal singular process that every single committee has followed. But just to make sure that the committee is on board, I would recommend that a motion be made and seconded and that there's a vote on it, just to make sure that the committee as a whole is on board.
Do we need Eric before he drops?
Eric? No.
We have quorum without Eric, but I hate submitting something that with just 3 community members, quite frankly, 4 members. So, okay, so let's try to, in the next 45 seconds, let's see if we can clean this up. I mean, obviously, so we're not writing this up right now. What we're doing is just basically providing the budget committee with feedback. So I mean, I don't know if we need specific language for that, Brendan, or do we just give them the idea and then we can offline it?
Yeah, we just need the idea. We need to be clear on what the request is about, which I am not clear on at the moment.
All right, Steve, you want to take a stab at it? Doesn't have to be too detailed, but just enough to have a clear, concise statement.
Sure. Additional funding for DHS to provide security at their facilities.
Okay,
So the request is for DHS to provide security at homeless shelters in our district.
Yep. Okay, is there a second?
I second.
All right, the motion has been seconded. I guess we take a roll on that.
Okay, please say whether you're in favor, oppose, abstain, or abstain for cause. Stu Desser,
Favor?
Eric Goldberg,
Favor?
Steve O,
Favor?
and Matt Roberts.
I'm in favor.
Okay, all four committee members present are in favor of the new budget request.
All right, so will you relay that to Reshma, or do I need to get in touch with her?
I can email both. I can email you, Matt, and Reshma, and I'll make sure Jesus is looped in as well, as I know he often does a lot of work on budget requests with me.
Okay, very good. So we'll move on. Thank you, Steve. Good call on that one. Let's move to, I know we're at 8 o'clock here, so I do want to move to the New York Civil Liberties Union. We have Isabel with us. And there was a pre-meeting the other day. What we decided is we're going to have this will be the first, this should just be an initial conversation. Obviously, the community was not informed of this until yesterday. So Isabel, I'm going to turn it over to you if you just want to give us a summary and maybe set the table here and give us a quick presentation, and then we can have a quick discussion and then circle back in the fall. Isabel, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Great. And can you all see the screen that I'm sharing? Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Isabel. I am a senior organizer at the New York Civil Liberties Union. This will be pretty quick. It's about a 10-minute presentation. As was mentioned, I talked to the chair and other folks to kind of prep for this and give them an overview of what this issue was. And we thought it made sense for me to bring it to the board so that you all are aware of something that may directly impact your community board, but also is just an issue that impacts all New Yorkers. So we're here to talk about the Strategic Response Group, which is a unit of the NYPD. It's a militarized rapid response unit. This unit was created in 2015, and it was originally created as a counterterrorism unit that would also police protests. Advocates like the ACLU, like a lot of local organizations, immediately said this was problematic, having a unit that does both of those things and conflating protest and terrorism. So the NYPD actually retracted the unit's original mission and then said that this unit would only be doing counterterror. The SRG was deployed within 2 months of that statement to protests after the killing of Freddie Gray here in the city, the protests that were happening here in the city, and really has been a staple of protest policing ever since. This unit has been nicknamed the Goon Squad by media. They are known for abuse of protesters and community members, so in and out of protests. The initial SRG budget was $13 million. That budget ballooned to 90 within 1 year. And the current estimated budget of the SRG is $133 million. There is almost no transparency at all around the size, the scope, the function, or the funding of the SRG. Its mission is constantly moving and changing with no transparency from the NYPD about what this unit is, how much it costs New Yorkers, and what it's actually doing. And I just want to be clear that the SRG is not your local precinct cop. This is a completely different kind of unit. This is a military style trained unit that uses militarized tools, weaponry, and crowd control tactics in our city every day. So just for some context of how we got here, the NYCLU has what's called the Protest Monitoring Program. Through that program, we train New Yorkers to go to protests across New York City and document police conduct at protests. We have been doing that since June of 2020 when we relaunched the program. And it was through that we saw that the SRG is either the catalyst for violence or an escalator at protests across New York for the past 3 years that we've been documenting there. We have a protest timeline that I can drop in the chat when I'm done, where we've compiled a lot of our documentation that we've taken, but that is not even fully encompassing what we've seen from the SRG at the more than 200 protests that we've monitored at in the last 3 years. Just a brief overview of kind of what makes the SRG stand out as a problematic unit. Firstly, the unit is a voluntary unit. So reports from the inside, and these reports came through the New York Post when this unit was first created. This unit attracts officers that are looking for quote unquote more action. They call them the hats and bats in their riot gear, right? And unfortunately, a lot of those officers already have lengthy misconduct records when they get into the SRG. And then once they're in the SRG, they actually receive abnormally high number of misconduct complaints. So the median complaint rate for all NYPD, and this is since 2020, is 3. For officers in the SRG, that number is 6. So it's double the median complaint rate. And in terms of their training was made public back in 2020. And the SRG has something called the bike squad, which are officers that are trained to ride bikes. They use those bikes often to trap protesters. They use those bikes as weapons. In that manual for this bike squad, they give examples of what a peaceful crowd is and what a violent crowd is. The examples that are given for a violent crowd are Black Lives Matter, Occupy Wall Street, and anti-Trump demonstrators. Time and time again, we have observed the SRG targeting racial justice protests and protests that are on the left, while allowing people like the Proud Boys, far-right groups, and white supremacist groups to protest without incident. Even when those protests are met with counter-protesters, we very often see the SRG physically turn their back to members of the Proud Boys and arrest counter-demonstrators. So this bias that we see is baked into their training, and we see it in and out of protests. Of complaints that include race between 2015 and 2020, 91% of complainants were people of color. I already mentioned the budget. This unit costs New Yorkers an estimated $133 million a year. That does not include things like overtime and equipment, which we know costs at least $2,000 per officer just based on the gear that they have alone. And there's no transparency around that. And then obviously the violence. We have seen time and time again, the SRG bring violence and escalation to non-violent protests. We have an unlimited amount of evidence of this unit's brutality and violence. It has been a hot topic many different times, even recently with the most recent protests. The SRG is central to the brutalization of protesters in our community, and that brutalization is in and out of protests wherever the SRG goes. So we launched a campaign to disband the SRG in January of 2022. We are a coalition led by Night Blue, but we have more than 60 organizations that are signed on. And the goal of this campaign is to disband the Strategic Response Group and reinvest its funds back into our communities. The NYPD has a robust 7-unit counterterrorism structure that has existed far before the SRG. The SRG is not listed under that bureau. Counterterrorism is no longer included in the unit's description of duties. And the only unique function of this unit is to police protests. And unfortunately, this unit does more than that. This unit has been central to the sweeps of homeless encampments across this city, where they have arrested unhoused people. They cleared Washington Square Park after curfew and brutalized and arrested people that were just in the park, not knowing that there was a curfew. They show up wherever the NYPD sees fit. And that is why we see them as something that is more than just a First Amendment issue, it's a safety issue. On March 1st of this year, City Council held an oversight hearing on this unit. The NYPD refused to attend this hearing, despite the fact that it was rescheduled twice so that they could attend, and that council was prepared to ask them questions about the SRG. They did not show up, but New Yorkers absolutely did. And there was almost 5 hours of testimony from New Yorkers who have been brutalized by the unit, calling for its disbandment. And then again, on March 20th, council members asked questions of the NYPD about this unit. They refused to answer those questions and cited a gag order that does not exist. So again, it's just this lack of transparency around the SRG that we come up against again and again. So specifically why this matters to you all, we've been presenting at community boards across the city because in November, the department announced that the SRG would be deployed to 20 high crime areas to support with kind of daily enforcement of the NYPD. So none of these precincts are directly in your community board, but they're close by. And our real concern here is that right now the SRG has their own headquarters. And the SRG, like I said, can be called and deployed wherever the department sees fit. Our concern is that with the SRG being deployed and scattered across the boroughs, the NYPD will rely more often on the SRG's enforcement to events that the SRG does not need to be at. We know that the SRG should not be policing communities. In 2018, if folks have heard about Sahid Vassell, he was a man that struggled with mental illness that was very well known by local cops. He was killed when the SRG came to that community. They were part of the group of officers that killed him. They were not familiar with him and they mistook a pipe for a gun. So these are the things that happen when we send in militarized units to community police. And we believe that this unit has no place at protests, has no place in our communities, absolutely has no place doing daily community policing where they are interacting with the public, especially when city council members have reached out to the NYPD to ask questions about this deployment and what it looks like. Community boards have reached out and there's been no information given about what this deployment will actually look like in our neighborhoods. And then just that image there, we have materials that we've created and have been distributing to let community members know that this unit exists and that it's being deployed to their neighborhood. So it's something that we've been doing community outreach on. So even if this isn't a campaign that the board is interested in getting involved with, it's good for everyone to know that this is happening. Most folks that I've presented to were not aware before we spoke. And then just so folks know kind of where the campaign is, these are the council members that have signed on to a statement in support of fully disbanding the SRG. We have 24 sign-ons right now. Manhattan Community Board 8 just passed a resolution in support of disbanding the SRG, and that will be finalized and released very soon. We just got that news today. So we are still in communication with all community boards that are in these districts and neighboring districts, and we're in the process of collecting those. And then in terms of our ask, or if you are interested as either an individual or as a board in taking part, and I spoke to the chair and to other folks who said that in terms of timeline, getting a resolution of support before the budget process probably isn't feasible for this board. So I totally understand that. But just so you all have context for what we are offering or asking of you all, we're asking for resolutions in support of either disbandment, or if community boards are not comfortable with using that kind of language or for calling for disbandment, we're asking for resolutions in support of not having the SRG deployed into communities. So there are kind of two options depending on where the board lands on it. And then as an individual, there are links here that I can also drop in the chat for getting involved in the campaign on your own, reaching out to your council member and asking him to sign on to the campaign as a supporter. And then on May 24th, next Wednesday, there is an executive budget hearing where we are mobilizing New Yorkers to testify about why the SRG should be disbanded. We have had folks that we present to at board meetings then get involved in the campaign and testify about why they don't want the SRG in their communities. So that's another way to get involved. And that's all I have. I really appreciate the time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Isabel. So we'll take, I have time for a couple of quick questions here. Steve, go ahead.
Just following the money for clarification, it was formed in 2015, starting with 13 million. Today it's 133 million.
Correct.
So in less than 10 years, the NYPD shot from 13 million to 133 million. We don't know where their funding comes from, other than that the NYPD obviously sees success in this department, thus this tremendous increase in funding. That's so less than 10 years, 13 to 133 million.
Yeah, so it's estimated to have gone from 13 to 90 within 1 year, and now it's estimated at 133. And that 133 number includes centrally allocated funds. So it's the total when you're not including things like overtime that we don't have a record of. And just generally, the SRG's budget is far less transparent than other units in the NYPD. It is especially opaque in terms of where the money comes from, where it's allocated in the budget. So it's been very difficult as advocates to figure out, to follow the money, like you said at the beginning of your question.
In 1 year, it went from 13 to 90.
Correct.
Any other questions here? I know we're coming up on pretty soon. Stu, go ahead.
Sure. What litigation have you undertaken pertaining to this unit?
Yeah, so we are currently suing the NYPD for its conduct at protests in 2020. The NYCLU is, and the SRG is really central to not only our lawsuits, but really all lawsuits related to that. So that's our current litigation. We are also looking into legislative opportunities around this unit and how we can go at this from a legislative angle. But right now we're focusing on the budget angle.
All right, any other questions? So the plan here is to try to get some better conversations, try to get some more research, try to get to the bottom of some of the points raised in the fall, and then we can decide if we want to make a statement on this. But a lot could happen between now and then, of course. Steve, you have another question?
Does this group also fall under the so if I understand, if a police officer is under investigation, internal affairs is involved, does the SRG also fall privy to that? If there's issues with that, does internal affairs also get involved with investigating into the SRG?
Yeah, I would assume that they're held to the same investigatory processes as the rest of the department. Yeah. So they get their CCRB records are public through databases, like all of it is accessible. Yeah.
Matt, I presume that they would not appear, but can we invite them?
Yeah, I mean, I reached out to Chief McCarthy's office and others, trying to get some information or try to get directed to a better contact. But similar to what Isabel was saying with the city council hearing, there's been no response. I'll try to have some off the record conversations over the next couple of months and see if I can get to the bottom of any of this. My internal contacts and people I know in the department, but we'll see. I mean, we'll of course send them a formal invite. Fall, whichever month agenda, but I would not expect them to appear in this regard. Obviously, if we want, precincts will come for updates, and other agencies, other parts of the NYPD will come for a specific purpose. But mention this, good luck. Steve.
Please correct me if I'm wrong. I do remember when they first started, they were a counterterrorism unit and thus got special funding from the federal government. And I wasn't aware they changed their mission statement where they don't have counterterrorism in their mission statement anymore. Do we know, following the money again, do they still get special funding from the federal government because they historically have received it because they were, but no longer have the word counterterrorism in their mission statement?
There is no information available about that. We have no idea where the money comes from. Also, when they amended the mission, it was within 1 month of creation. It was almost immediately. It was Commissioner Bratton at the time gave a full statement saying that the unit would no longer be doing any kind of policing of protest, that it would be a solely counterterror unit. So there was not a lot of time between the two, right? They got the money, presumably, and then immediately we were told that they would not be a protest unit.
So within 2015, 2016, they changed their mission statement where it removed the words counterterrorism.
Yes, they made the announcement that the unit would not be. Yeah, correct. The unit was launched in January. The statement was made in January.
All right, Stu, give your hand up.
All right, so first I should mention that I used to be a legal observer and I've seen the behavior of NYPD at protests, and I'm aware of many reports. And it's pretty troubling. You know, this isn't the way we should want our police department to behave. I think the lack of accountability, the fact that they won't answer questions, that they won't appear, is also troubling. I would like to see more about this. But I'd like to know, Matt, how you feel we should proceed. I mean, I think this particular unit has a history of problems that transcend any issue that we could have with NYPD. So I would like to continue this, you know, to look at this, but how would you suggest we do that?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm hearing the presentation for the first time. Obviously, I've heard rumblings of this over the past several months. But we'll try to get either city council or NYPD to to help us understand some of the budget discrepancies. I know that part. I think we can get a little bit more clarity in terms of budgeting and where things came out of this. But as far as getting NYPD on the record, it's gonna be difficult. But I will say that a lot of things have changed since 2020. There's been a lot of different training that I think the department, under whatever label you want to give it, recognizes that there were mistakes made there, and they've tried to correct that as best they can internally. Again, we'll have to get more specifics on that, but so we'll continue the conversation. This was just added to the agenda a couple of days ago, so we'll have to bring it back once we give the community ample time to join. Brendan?
Yeah, just wanted to flag that Nicole Paykoff again has something to say on this item.
I mean, all right, we'll hear Nicole, but if she speaks out again, we might have to bring her on the committee. Go ahead, Nicole.
Hi there. I just want to be as respectful as I can saying this. I've listened to what Isabel had to say, and I've also followed a lot of stuff with both the police and the protests. And the thing that concerns me about this presentation is it's extremely pointed. Nobody wants bad officers and nobody wants violence at protests. I am sure everybody here could agree to that. But the thing that I find really super troubling is the basic direction a lot of the politicians have gone, and a lot of and especially the NCLU and the ACLU have been extremely, extremely pointed against the police, which is basically taking some really bad cops, which we should be focusing on, and putting it all as all of the police. The reason the budget likely went up over that amount of time was there's been a huge increase in protesting. A lot of these protests, while some of the police, I'm sure, did not do their job the best, I will say, to say the least, there has also been a lot of incidents with the public prodding them, violent, hitting officers. There's been a lot of that. And none of that is mentioned at all in anything from this presentation. The other thing that's troubling is like sitting there and saying, well, yes, you admit that there isn't an investigation unit, the same one that investigates all the cops, that oversees this unit, and then saying there's no transparency. Yes, clearly there is some transparency, but as the police department, they cannot let us know every single thing they're doing, I'm sure for security reasons. I know that when they have protests, that the police department does go and have to secure the area, make sure that nothing goes on. And there's also people from out of state that come to some of these protests as well. You can't say everybody is safe. And the ones that they have actually pinpointed, like the Black Lives Matter, Occupy Wall Street, there have been violent incidents from people at the protests. It's not just the police. So the thing that I find disconcerting about any of this stuff is not looking at where the data is coming from NCLU. The whole thing of recruiting people to watch these protests who clearly have a vested interest in finding something wrong with the cops is probably not the best approach to see an equal-handed observation of what actually is going on. And while I respect the fact that obviously we are all on the same page of not wanting violent police protests or police that are militant, the fact of the matter is there's a lot of things going on right now in our neighborhoods with heavy crime increases, the subway's been awful, and hearing politicians and organizations like the NCLU go off with these things like, oh, they call them this and that behind their back sounds childish and very unresearched. Like, I would like to see the documents and also see that they're not like some of the stuff that was in support of bail reform, where it was essentially nonprofit organizations that get money and it's their main mission to go for a cause. I feel like the NCLU with their lawsuits and other related matters has a definite interest in finding the police wrong in this matter. I think, as just saying for the community board, I hope you guys are really taking into account both sides of this, because sitting here and asking, the public really needs to be involved with these things and really see if they actually have any data that isn't pointed that shows that these things are going on. And also to see firsthand some of the videos they show of the cops, they should show some of the protesters and how they've acted, which I'm not saying is wrong. You should always have the right to protest, but you can't get violent. You shouldn't be sitting there prodding the police. And the police need to be respected too. Most of them do their job and they're here to protect us, especially now that crime is rising. People that are agitators or people like the NCLU who are now saying it's a rights issue and all of this other stuff are not looking at the bigger picture. Naming people like Tiffany Caban in the Queens district, who is completely anti-police by everyone's standards, including, I'm sure, her own, she would admit it, are not the people you should be proud to have on your side. So I'm hoping, as somebody in this community, that you guys are going to listen to both sides of this. And Isabel, if this wants to be taken seriously, this actual presentation, I hope you'll provide the people in the community board actual documentation of all of these incidents, where you get the information from, where these names are being called, also how you recruit the actual people that are observing the police, and if you actually screen them to see if they have any records or other interest in doing that job, and how you get organizers. Because obviously if they're pointed and they have an issue with the police, they're probably not the people who should be looking after the police. And I'm sorry to be so abrupt on this, but this is just, I feel like the whole thing of this presentation was just really, really not okay. And thank you.
I'd like to respond, if possible.
Yeah, so Isabel, hold on. I'll give you a second. I just want to set everybody's expectations here. So appreciate the comments, Nicole. I do want to make sure that we do a little bit more, put out a little bit more community notice so we can understand the full point of view that the community has here. So that's why we're not going to take any action tonight. This is just part one of a series of conversations. So Isabel, I'll give it to you, and then I'll go to Stu, Steve, and then we're going to leave it there for time.
Thanks, appreciate it. Well, firstly, the New York Civil Liberties is a civil liberties organization. Our goal and mission is to guard the civil liberties of New Yorkers. We are a non-biased party. We train our monitors to document police conduct. because we are not focused on the behavior of protesters because protesters are not being funded by the city to do a job, right? We are focusing on the actions of police because the First Amendment is something that we are all guaranteed, and we document the conduct of police on the ground. Because there are laws and regulations and policies that the NYPD should be following. We did not have a campaign to disband this unit until we documented what was happening on the ground. There are links in the chat. You can Google disband the SRG. We have plenty of documentation. You can watch an entire timeline of footage. I'm not sure what you mean by calling names, but that is written in the unit's training that is available online to the public. So we did not go into this work to target the SRG. The SRG made itself a target of this specific campaign through its behavior. And in terms of transparency, having internal affairs does not mean transparency. That's just an investigatory process. Actually, the DOI did a report and called what the SRG did in Mott Haven a human rights violation, and recommended that the unit's role in protest should be reevaluated altogether. So this is not just nonprofits, right? These are third-party people that are reviewing what has occurred. Human Rights Watch called it a human rights violation as well. So this is objective information that we've seen through monitoring, where we, including staff, and lawyers, have reviewed footage, have seen things firsthand. And this is not a generalization of all police. We are talking about a specific unit. So when you said, we want good cops and there are some bad cops, we're talking about a unit that's being trained to be bad. So that's why we are focused on this unit. It is not a sweeping generalization. And I didn't say that at any point. So I just want to make that clear. This is not about the NYPD at large and us coming for the NYPD. This was not a plan that we put together to take down the SRG. This was a response to behavior that we've seen from a very specific and small unit of the NYPD at large. That's all.
All right, thanks, Isabel. Stu, I'm going to go to you and then Steve, and then we're going to.
I think our goal is to have balanced presentations. It's kind of hard to do that if the unit refuses to talk with us. I reject the notion that they can't talk to us because they have to protect practices and procedures. And we also know that when it comes to policing protests, there's been a lot of litigation where officers have made essentially false arrests, where the arresting officer didn't actually witness what occurred. So I don't think that we are against NYPD, but I think that there are certainly issues that we need to address. And this sort of unit is one of them, and it's not uncommon within policing for certain units to be formed by people who volunteer, and the people who volunteer are often the people you least want in those units. But in any case, I think we should see more evidence, and we should explore this. And we'll try to be as balanced as possible, but NYPD has to cooperate if they want us to see their perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Stu. I do think we'll be able to get some more information. I don't know how much, but I think there's just some initial hesitancy right now. I think we got to get through the budget process first, and then I think things will settle. But I think tensions are being heightened unnecessarily. So going into July 1st in the budget, we'll see where things land after that and what comes out of it. Steve, you get the final words tonight.
No pressure. So in the same vein of our earlier discussions about reviewing the district's budget on public safety, we emphasize how we think we need to push forward and continue with NYPD's funding for information technology group for cameras. Now we just spoke about the security at DHS. SRG's funding, which is quite shocking to hear grow so significantly, would emphasize that the NYPD is either success or has been underfunded to begin with. But we need to know what those criteria are that the NYPD sees, why it needs this budget, how it got to the size it came to, where does it see its success? Because as a committee of public safety, we want to see that what is their measure of success? Because right now, lawsuits, complaints, articles in the news. We're just looking for a chance to see if it's being misrepresented, or have them have a chance to speak up. Because to me, that a budget shooting from 13 million, even 90 million to 133, if I got that correct, that's tremendous. Tremendous to the point where we can't get 2 cameras in parks. It's where's the sense? It's not making sense for at least our district, and maybe we're not seeing it. And that's kind of where, on the budget perspective, I'd like to see how this is, how NYPD is providing this as a measure of success.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I mean, I think we can get clarification on some of the budget numbers. I mean, there's usually explanations, but there's also a lot of decorating numbers that goes on within budgets. So it sounds like a big number, but I think we need to understand. We need to get a better explanation for that. A lot of good points, a lot of arguments on both sides here. So we'll take a couple months off for the summer. We still full board next month. Bring this back in either September, October, depending on what else comes up over the summer. We'll get as much information as we can, but I would encourage everybody to think about the actions and the possibilities of what could happen if in the sense of protests. A lot of times when you have protests and counter demonstrations at the same time, they clash and they can get heated. So you sort of have to put yourself into the officer's perspective with the intelligence that they have on a given protest. And I'm just using a vague generic example here, but intelligence sometimes suggests that things can get ugly, and they need to prepare for the worst, and they're being trained to step in before keep safety. So you'd have to look at what the intelligence suggests. You'd have to look at what the training is and how they keep everybody safe. I think everybody wants safety here. I don't think we should single out any particular police officers unless there's clear evidence of misconduct. And as far as SRG goes, I mean, it's part of the police department. I think we should focus on the NYPD as a whole. There's always opportunities for improvement. There's always things they can do better. So I think that's where we need to keep. And if modifying some of the practices of the SRG, I mean, is what everybody feels is best, then I think we can look at that. But I don't want finger pointing. I don't want this person hates the police. This person loves the police. It's have to be practical and pragmatic about keeping everyone safe here. So we'll take the summer, see where things stand come September. So thanks to everybody who participated tonight. I know we covered a lot of ground. We'll get deeper into this issue as well. As always, if you guys have any questions, concerns, feel free to send me an email over the summer. If there's any topics that you'd like to see addressed in the fall, let me know that. We should have some new board members appointed and hopefully some new committee members. Obviously, we have lost 3 committee members in the past couple of weeks, so we're down to just a few people here. So also another reason why I don't want to get too deep into any particular topic. And change over. So thank you all. That's going to do it for Chair's report. Are there any items of old or new business? All right. Seeing none, coming up on 8:38, we will adjourn. There's no objection. Thanks, everybody.